How many of you guys know about LAPSA? About LAPSA, 5-minute advertising? League of Professional System Administrators. Essentially like what the doctors have the AMA and the lawyers have the Bar Association. Professional group. If you are a system administrator, I encourage you to get out to lapsa.org and check it out. It's about a year old. We're up to about 1,000 people now. You can talk to me about it afterwards, but find one little bit of advertising. A good group of people. So today we're going to talk about BackupPC. This is an enterprise level. By that I mean it can scale from 1 to well over thousands of machines. I've used it at sites of 1,500 machines down to my home, which is 3 machines. And it's easy. It's the same scaling along the whole entire way. Yes?
You mentioned enterprise. Would it be appropriate for home level?
Yes. I use it in my home right now for 3 machines. And it's easily scaled all the way up to 1,000. Well, I think I'm probably the largest install of it at 1,500 machines right now.
So would I have to be a sysadmin level?
You don't have to be a sysadmin. This is nice. So today we're going to talk about that. Talk a little bit about the history, what it can do for you and what it can't do. It does have some limitations. A little bit about how it works, picking your hardware. Then we're going to actually go into a demonstration. We'll look at the configuration. We'll do some backups. And finally, at the end, we'll talk about some tips and tricks. It was created by a guy named Craig Barrett. First released in 2001. 3.0 was released in January of this year. He's very conservative. He's a great guy for a system admin. You know, it's not buggy software. Because backups are so critical, you can't afford to have bugs in them. The only time you need it is when something really went wrong, right? It's written in Perl and it runs on almost all Unix platforms. It scales well from 1 to 1,000 machines. It works well over both the local area network and the WAN network. If you're interested, if you have a Linux box, another commercial plug here, and you're interested in backing up online, you know, go check out Devinza.com. I do some consulting for them, and we use BackupPC to back up Linux and Macintoshes over the internet for various corporations. We have a bank, we have a lumberyard store, a couple of broadband sports, a couple other customers. It works well for servers, desktop, and laptops, machines that are off and on your network. You can deal with that very well. Supports Windows, Mac OS X, and all Unix clients that I've had the chance to deal with yet. Has archives, and once you get the thing set up, it just runs in the background. You don't have to worry about it. It's got both web and command line interfaces. Extensive include and exclude lists, so you can say back up my root directory, but avoid /proc, avoid these type of files. With wildcards in it. You have your choice of various transport mechanisms is what the author calls them. So once you decide you're going to back up a machine, you can decide whether you want to use tar, rsync, or SMB to actually get the files off the machine and onto the backup server. It does a lot of data compression, and we'll talk more about that later. It's got local client configurations. So on the Devinza.com, we have a master configuration, and then if this client wants to be backed up, we have one client that wants a machine backed up every 4 hours, his mail server, but he only wants to keep 2 days of configuration of backups. That's cool. That's what we do for him. On another client wants 2 months of backups, once a day. It's really easy to make those type of changes. Multiple users and user email. Devinza.com, every client is totally separate. They get notifications, they log in, they only see their machines. Blackout periods. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's a really nice way to deal with laptops that are off and on the network. And literally everything is configurable within the system. If you want to back up every hour, you can do that. Every 15 minutes, you can do that. Once a day. It's up to how you want to set it up. It makes it really nice. Some of the limitations. Let me talk a little bit about hard links. What it does is if it sees the same file twice, it doesn't put the same file on disk. It puts it on disk once and creates a hard link to it for the second file that gets copied to disk. what this buys for you. For example, at the school district, I'm backing up literally 1.1 to 1.2 terabytes per server, but I'm only using up about 650 gigabytes on my server, because all the teachers will get the same document sent to them, right? I keep one copy on disk. That's the plus side. The downside is you'll end up in that type of instance with literally 30 or 40,000 hard links. And if you try to make a copy of that disk, tar won't work, it'll break. rsync won't work, it'll break. Because most programs don't like a lot of hard links, most copying programs. You have to use something like DD. If you're smart, you set it up using Logical Volume Manager, and you have a mirror, you can break the mirror. File sizes, it works really well up to file sizes of 4 or 5 gigabytes. If you have a bunch of large image files, it might not be the best tool to use. It does have some issues. BackupPC Nightly. This is more of a problem in the 2.x series, and the 1.x series isn't so much a problem. If you have a lot, so how does it work? It uses a pool, so each file is only placed on disk once. That's what the hard links are. Every hour it wakes up, or at a configurable time, it wakes up and it checks its queues and it says, oh, I haven't backed you up, and you said I'm supposed to back you up every 24 hours. It's been over 24 hours. I'm going to go put you in the queue to try to back you up. Then after it queues up all the clients, it runs BackupPC dump for each client. That goes out, and we'll talk a little bit more about what it does, but essentially it runs the backup. After it grabs all the data off the client, it runs BackupPC link. Every 5 minutes it wakes up and clears out the old backups that you don't need anymore. And at night it runs a cleanup process. And that's the one kind of block in that. If you're trying to do a lot of backups at night, that process locks everything else out during that time. BackupPC dump. First it tries to ping the client, and this is where this blackout period comes in. So for example, I got a school district. We have a lot of laptops. We also have a lot of desktops. The desktops are always on. If it can ping the client 7 times, or a configurable amount, it then says, I'm not going to back up the client from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. because I know they're going to be on at night. And I'm going to try to go after all those ones that kind of come off and on the network. So what that does is it means we're only backing up laptops during the day because we never know if we're going to catch them or not. The machines that are always on the network get backed up during the nighttime. It chooses a full or incremental backup. I typically back up a full once a week and then incremental the rest of the time. It then will back up the files via the selected transport, rsync or tar or SMB. If the file exists, it creates a hard link. It doesn't even copy the file over. What it does is it reads the first, I forget how many bytes of the file, computes a hash, and the guy has done a lot of studies on a lot of data that says, okay, out of X hundreds and hundreds of thousands of files, you'll get less than 20 duplicates. So it reads the first few bytes of the file across the network, it computes a hash. If that matches something that's already on disk, it says, oh, I don't need the rest of it. I'm just going to create a hard link. What reduces your network bandwidth. And then finally, at the end of copying everything over, it moves all the other old backups to the trash folder. BackupPC link compresses files. So in addition to doing hard links, which can throw out a whole chunk of data, right? It actually runs a Z-Lib compression on the files, which compresses them even more, and you save even more data space. And then it will link the new files into the pool. BackupPC Nightly will clean out the pool of all the expired files. Okay, hardware. Most of the people on the forums, BackupPC has got a very active forums at backupPC.sourceforge.net, have found that it's, instead of using a big box like a 4-processor Opteron type thing, it's a lot better off to use a whole bunch of 1U boxes with a 3-word card in them, 4 disk drives. On my home machine, I just use the software RAID. It works great. If you're doing anything where you're up to like 40 or 50 clients, you're probably going to want to use a 3-word card. You get much better performance. If you're going to use rsync, you're probably going to want to have at least 1 gigabyte of memory because rsync tends to use a lot of memory. If you're going to use tar, you can get by 512 megabytes. But this type of typical server, I'll easily do 250 to 300 clients with roughly 2 gigabytes per client. And it does them every day with no problem, just kind of around the clock, just checking them. The disk array you can set up in 2 ways. If you set it up as 2 mirrors, one for the operating system and one for the data, that gives you a really nice, cheap way to do off-site storage. What you do is you set up your data mirror, logical volume manager, and to do off-site storage, you just break the mirror, you take the disk off-site, you throw a new one in, have it rebuilt. Then after a week or so, break the mirror, take the disk off-site, and it's a cheap way to do it. That's probably the most common way that people do off-site storage. Oops. You can get the software from there, or it's packaged for most distributions. If you happen to be a Debian fanatic like I am, just apt-get, update, apt-get, install BackupPC, and you're done. The distributions are typically a little bit older, but the program doesn't change very rapidly. And there are just so few bugs. If you look through the change log between revisions, he's got maybe 5 or 6 bugs. That's it. And they're usually relatively minor. Okay, let's go take a look at some demos. What I have here is actually VMware. How many people know about VMware? Ah, good. Okay. So I've got multiple workstations all running here. We've got a Sarge workstation. I've got Windows. And I've got a brand new Debian workstation, all up and active running. So let's go back to when you first log in, it uses HT password or Apache authentication, so you can tie it into LDAP or anything like that. It has a default user called BackupPC that sees every single machine on the system. So we've got 3 hosts. I've got my Debian machine. I have the operating system on it. Talk about that a little bit. And I've got my Windows machine being backed up. Shows me our currently running jobs, and it shows you any failures. If it does fail, it'll send you an email. It first sends the email to the administrator, and then if you wish, you can also send an email out to the user to let them know that something went wrong. It gives you a lot of more information about the PIDs and pending requests. Underneath the newer version, this version you can't edit the config file directly. The new version, there's a web-based config file editor, which is really nice. People see that okay? Yeah, kind of. Let me see that. That better? Oh, yeah. Okay. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and kind of pick out the type of configuration stuff that you're more likely to play with. The first one is this wake-up schedule. So this one says I'm going to wake up every hour and see if there's something that needs to be backed up. You can change that to any schedule you want. You can change it to, wake up at 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. That's it. Wake up at 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. every hour, and then, it's just a chunk of numbers. Wake up every 15 minutes, your choice. The next item that people typically play with is how many backups am I going to run in parallel? On that 1U box, you're pretty much limited to 4 backups in parallel with a 3-ware card. Beyond that, it'll start to thrash. Then you have both automated-driven backups, ones that it schedules, and then users can schedule their own backups. Or, for example, if I know I'm going to be rebuilding a machine, I'm going to do a backup before I rebuild it. That one we can skip. Okay. DHCP address range. One of the things that BackupPC needs is it needs to be able to get to the machine by name, not by IP. So DHCP machines are kind of problematic. If you have Windows machines, it will use Wins to track them down. If you don't, there's two ways of doing it. One way is to use dynamic DHCP and make sure the machine always gets the same IP address. You assign a static IP to a MAC address, right? Another way is to do where you give it a range, and it'll sit there and ping everybody in that range. And then when it finds somebody, it'll try to figure out what their name should be. That way is pretty much deprecated because it takes a lot of time to go through the ranges. They would much rather use Wins or static IP, or what I've done at the school district, because we have Macs, we actually have all the Macintoshes run a client, a small script that stuffs their MAC address and their current IP into LDAP, and then I have BackupPC check that.
What about your laptops? They're moving around all the time.
Yeah, and what happens is whenever the laptop gets stuck on the network, that client runs, and it sticks its current stuff into LDAP, and then BackupPC will check that and say, aha, you are now, this name is now on this address. It actually works quite well. But for your home system, you can just tell the BackupPC server, oh, this guy's going to be at this address, and off I go. Okay, don't need to change those. That. If you're doing Windows, you'll want to set the SMB share name if you happen to be using that. That's generally not the recommended way, but a lot of people still use the SMB client shares. And then you'll need a login name and password for it. This file, again, I can see it now because I'm logged in as essentially the administrator users. If you log in as a normal user, you'll never see access to this file. Those passwords are typically reasonably well secured. You can set if you're using tar, you set a share name. And you can have multiple share names. You know, home, source, /data. Take your choice. Okay, periods. This is how often you're going to do a backup. So on the full, as soon as I get over 6.97 days, I'm going to trigger another automated backup since the last full. It's just Perl. You can say 6 point something. But as soon as it gets past that number, it's going to say, whoops, time to do a full. And on the incrementals, I have 1 day. All of this stuff can be overridden on a client-by-client basis, which makes it really nice if you're doing multiple clients that have different configuration requirements or backup requirements. So for example, for the mail server, I set the incremental period down to about a quarter of a day, because they wanted a whole bunch of backups throughout the day. And the full, actually, in the full, we set it to be 1 day. Now, this is kind of interesting in that it can keep backups, not just saying keep the last 10 full backups or something, or the last month of full backups. You can actually do it on an exponential scale, which makes it really nice. Let's see if I can get an example. Here we go. It's like right here. I'm keeping 4 most recent ones, the last month. Then I'm going to keep, the next ones are going to be kept at a 4-week. So this is be like 1 month out, 2 months out, 3 months out, 4 months out. And then I got a couple that are kept about a year out. So if you need for archival purposes, you need to have just some backups from a long time ago, just kind of snapshots in time. This is an easy way to do it. A little bit hard to grab your mind around it. It took me a while. But the reason where I tend to use this is at the school district, we'll wipe out and upgrade all the machines over the summer. So normally we keep a 2-week window of backups, and I'll change this to saying, okay, I want to keep that last full backup. I want to keep it for 4 months just in case something went wrong and we didn't restore the machine properly. So when the teacher comes back in the fall, I still have a backup from last June. And this is the trick I do to make sure that happens. So in this case, I'm just keeping 1 full backup. It will always keep at least 1 full backup, and it will always make sure that if I have 2 full backups by accident, at 90 days, one of them will disappear. I'm keeping 6 incrementals. I'm keeping them for at least one of them. And the oldest one, if I have more than one, I'll blow away them all at 30 days of age. It also has the ability that if a backup gets interrupted, because teachers and people don't know the backup is happening, it happens behind the scenes. So you're halfway through a backup and then the teacher unplugs their laptop, right? Walk around, plug it back in. It'll pick up from the point that it was unplugged, which on a wireless network makes a big difference, because it can take us 3 or 4 tries to get a wireless backup completed at 2 gigabytes. Is that all we want to worry about? This is where I'm going to specify. So I've specified that I'm going to back up everything underneath slash or on $. Now I want to specify exactly what I'm going to back up on that share. So not just the SharePoint, but what directory is on that SharePoint. And this would be like $, I'm going to back up my files, or /important, or more files. You can have pretty long arrays here of stuff, of what you're going to grab. And then it will ignore everything else on that SharePoint. If you leave it to undep, it backs up the entire SharePoint, grabs everything. And exclude files are done the same way. So I'm going to exclude /temp or /temp and WinTemp. You can use wildcards in exclude. You can say exclude *cache*, and you won't back up any Firefox cache files. The wildcards get in handy a lot. You can say, for example, on our teacher directories, on some of them, we just say, we don't want executables. You shouldn't have them out there. I'm not going to back them up. *exe. I don't touch a single executable. It never gets touched. So there's a lot of flexibility here to only back up the things that you really want. On some of the ones with Devinza.com, we don't back up all of the little tilde files from the Emacs stuff. Or like the .svn directories. So anything with .svn, we just don't even go down and back it up. Okay, blackout. I talked a little bit about that. So if it gets 3 bad pings, it says, oops, that machine, I'm always going to try it every single time I queue up machines. As soon as I get 7 good pings, I'm going to make sure I won't do it during the blackout period. So the blackout period is essentially times where I won't run the backup. I won't run the backup automatically. So the blackout period here is from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. on weekdays. Those are the times I only want the machines that just kind of randomly appear on my network to be trying to back up. And then one last thing, if there's 0 files, something's wrong. And so you can have it throw an error and send an email to somebody. If it tries to back up a share, it connects to it, everything works good, there's nothing there. Okay, we'll talk a little about transport. I've got SMB, rsync. RsyncD is where you actually run an rsync daemon on the client. Majority of backup PCs, you don't have to run anything on the client, which makes it really attractive. With Devinza.com, our clients like it because they don't have to install any software on their critical systems. Tar. And archive is something I really haven't played with, but allows you to essentially take a backup that's already happened and then stick it onto 1 or more CDs. It'll break a backup across a bunch of CDs or DVDs. So in this case, at the global level, this is the global file. I picked SMB. Transfer log level, I'm in touch with that. My client path. And then they have these full command. So this is the command it's going to run when it's doing a full backup. That path, that share name. This is the command you can change if you want different options. And for an incremental backup, you can use slightly different options. And it's really nice because you can put all kinds of wonderful commands in here and stuff that may be specific to your actual installation. And then they have the restore command. If A lot of customers only want BackupPC just to do the backups. They don't want us to have write privileges into their directory, but it will write exactly right back. And it will do a restore like to a slightly different directory. And we'll go through an example of that. You have the same setup for the tar transport, the tar client command, the full arguments, incremental arguments, and then the restore command. And you have the same setup for the rsync. Normally, you don't ever have to change any of this stuff. When we look at the per client config files, I'll show you a few changes that on that I made. Where else are we here? That's all standard rsync args. All that archive stuff. Yeah. All right. Gives you a really nice host summary where it says number of pools, how old the pool is. So I basically set this thing up yesterday. On the bus coming up here, I ran an incremental, so that's a third of a day old. How fast it took, the size of the backup, and there's nothing to do. It'll keep me a list of hosts with no backups. Now if I go to one of these hosts, grab that one, I can start an incremental backup. Go up to status. Oh, let's go grab a host that's actually got some. Go back to here. It's now colored green, saying it just finished the backup. There wasn't a whole lot of data on that yet. And I've got 2 incrementals. I'll do this one. Start an incremental. And I can see I got a currently running backup job down here. And a little bit darker colored green saying there's a backup in progress. Really self-explanatory. It's got really good logs here. When I go in, to add a machine to BackupPC, you edit the host file, and you basically add in the machine name. If you're going to use that thing where it goes through the range of DHCP addresses, you put a 1 here. Other than that, you put a 0 that says you're just going to go out and find the machine. You'll via some lookup mechanism, you'll find it. You then give it a user that has access to it. So if you notice, user ski has access to all 3 machines. User jski only has access to 1 machine. Let me see if I can do this here real quick. So I'm starting up another version of Firefox, just as a different user. I'll fire up here in a moment. And we'll log in as jski, and you'll see that jski only has access to 1 machine. Well, that's firing up. Current queues. There are nothing going on in my current queues. But if you have, a lot of machines on the server, like 250 servers or so, now let's pull this back. So this is what a user sees. The menu is much smaller. Sorry about that. So you notice that the menu is much smaller, and when I go in here and select the host, they only see the one host that they're associated with. They can't see anybody else's. Even though they're all on the same machine that's sharing it, it really locks them down. They just can't get to it. I'll show you that. Okay, on a busy machine, like the ones I've got a couple hundred or upwards of 300 machines on, you'll almost always see something going on in the background queue summary or in the user queue summary. That people are saying, oh, I need a restore, for example. After the host summary. When you click on a machine, now both backups have finished. You see a couple of options here. I'll see my backup summary, I'll see a transfer summary. There's no errors. The transfer log actually tells me all the files that got backed up. If you can't remember where the file is on the machine, open this up and do a search. You know, Control F, let's go try to find some file name. If the user says, yeah, I have this file and I don't remember where it was. Another nice thing you'll notice is it keeps track of basically revisions. So on Division.com, we typically keep 30 days online, so the person can go back in time. It does filling automatically between a full and an incremental. So when I hit the incremental here, and I go down into it, it's not just getting the files that were backed up at that incremental, it's also grabbing all the files that were previous. It's giving me a complete snapshot of what was on disk at that point in time. And I can go down through here and grab whatever I want. If I want to do a restore, I can click it, go down to the bottom, click Restore Selected Files. This is kind of slick. You got 3 ways to do a restore. Direct restores, I'm going to pull it right back to the machine. But I can pull it back to a different machine. It's a great way to migrate stuff from one machine to another. This is what we actually do in the school district. We're actually, we have a bunch of very old Macintoshes. They're like 5, 6 years old. And we're actually losing 20 of them a week. And we do 20 restores a week. We have a new machine get brought in, and we just restore it right back to the new machine. So you can do that. You can restore to a different share. You can restore to a different place. So in this one, I'm just going to restore to there. In addition to those type of restores, you can either do a zip or tar archive back to the machine that's running the browser. So for example, maybe not the best example, we had a teacher that didn't do certain things. They were not looking at the websites they should have been looking at. But of course, we had lots of backups of them. And we just did a restore back to my laptop here as a zip archive, and I burned it off to a CD and said, here, give it to the security guy. And he was a happy camper, and the teacher wasn't. So you have, it's really nice that you can pull down either special files, your database files. We have a lot of customers that on Divinza that'll sit there and they'll do all their backups, and then maybe once a month they'll want to keep a copy in their hands. They just burn it off to a tar archive or a zip archive and put it on a CD, and then they've got it, separate from Divinza, separate from the production machine. So when I start the restore, so I'm basically going to restore that directory off to a different location. It says, do you really want to do that? Which is always nice. And if we go back to Debian-X, we'll actually find it. I'll show you that in a moment. Oops, wrong. One of the tricks is that BackupPC logs in as a non-privileged user. I don't want root privileges on my customers' machines. It's just plain asking for trouble. They're going to blame me for everything that goes wrong because I got root, right? So what we do, let's see, I need to go to this guy. I don't know if I can make this bigger.
Scoot it over.
Yeah. Scoot it over and we'll make it bigger. Normally, I wouldn't have root privileges. But in this case, I'd say to allow BackupPC to back up operating system files without root privileges. And I'll type this down. I'll move it up. So this is the BackupPC user. I'm saying you can come in, and all you can do is run tar as root. Can't do anything else. That allows the BackupPC user to come in and back up all the operating system files, like /, etc., and essentially do enough that you can do a bare metal restore if you had to. Normally, the ski user doesn't have any privileges to do anything on the machine. That's a quick trick to get around that problem. So if we go down to home /c, you notice that Paragon firmware, that's the directory that we just restored. If I do a LS desktop, it's in there somewhere, yeah. So if I do something like this, I don't have any desktop directory. Well, that will be back there in just a minute. Host summary. So what I often do is I'll have a normal user directory. I don't want the user to have access to the OS stuff. I'll create a second name for the same machine, same IP. Here I've got etc. in var. And you notice in var I've got backups, and inside backups I've got some files in there. Now if I actually go over to the machine, look at that. Our desktop directory came back. I've restored it. That's how easy it is to do a restore. Click, click, you're done. Now if I cd down into you notice on here, I've got a whole bunch of files. But since I'm backing up every night, I don't need all these other files. And what I've done to get around that So this is a client configuration file. This is the stuff I'm going to override. I'm telling it to use the tar transfer method, just back up these file folders, and on this one I'm excluding anything that's a star status and it has a 1 through 6 after it. So that gives an example of the ability of the exclude stuff. You can do a lot of cool things in there. And it gives you an example of that. Here's my commands. And if we can scroll down, I've given it a slightly different blackout period. And I've said in my tar command, go sudo bin tar instead of just running bin tar. That's what allows me to back up all the system files. Does that make sense? Okay. Another trick with the config files is you can do a link. So you can sit there and take all the config files. If you have like 10 or 50 or 100 clients that happen to have the same type of config file, you can just link them, use soft links, so they all point to the same config file. Are there any questions? Oh, yeah, one last thing. When you're down and buried down in here, you can go up here and you can scroll back in time. So you can see what was later. And that comes in handy if somebody's asking you, saying, well, I think I had it this day or that day or the other day. And you can just go back through your backups until you find it, if they know what directory it was in. You can also view the history. And here I've got one full and one incremental and all the files come from the full version. Nothing's changed. Log files, log files. Yeah, we got new log files. Pretty decent log files. It tells you pretty much, like the transfer log tells you all the files that got transferred. It tells you how many files were transferred, how much space it used. It also will tell you the compression ratios. I go down here on the server. So you notice I got 13 errors here. Almost all those errors are because of files that were locked. It couldn't open the file to back it up. And you'll see that a lot on Windows. If you are backing up a Windows box, there's a command line command you can run that will dump the system state to a file, and then you can get the system state. And it does give you a lot of detail here about how many files it did on each one, how large, megabytes per second, and then down here it gives you compression, so you can figure out what type of compression you're getting on the files. Any questions on that? Yes?
Matt, specific question.
Sure.
Do you have any other alternatives on transport mechanisms?
With
rsync and tar have trouble with some of the Macs?
Actually, with the Apples, I'll talk about that. Well, I'll talk about it right now. With Macs, you have to use something called xtar to get the resource forks. It works perfectly on OS X 10.1, 2. Well, I'm not sure about 10.1. It works perfectly on 10.2, 3, and 4. On 10.4, the Apple tar actually started supporting resource forks. But you can't use rsync or you lose every single resource fork. If you don't know much about Macs, they store a lot of information in resource forks. Icons and file types and stuff are stored in this weird thing called a resource fork. And if you use a copy command or anything, it doesn't come along, which means that then the programs, the applications don't know what to do with that data file.
As follow-up, are Finder comments just hopeless? Finder comments, are those just hopeless to back up?
No. I believe we're getting those. I haven't had anybody complain about it.
Well, I don't know where they live. So.
Yeah. Well, what I do is I grab /users, and pretty much everything underneath /users we just grab. And we're able to back up OS X 9 applications and OS 9 applications that run in the emulation mode, and it seems to work just fine. Again, the only issue we've run into is some teachers doing really large video files on the order of 5 or 6 gigabyte video files, and those are problematic. They sometimes work, sometimes don't work, and I don't know if they're not working because when I'm backing it up, the teacher's making a change to the file, or what. Okay. In addition to the web interface, if you're a command line guy, oh yes, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, you mentioned that you're SSHing in as non-root for
Yes.
EP, and
Pretty much do almost anything you want to from the GUI, you can do from the command line. So I can compress files, I can create tar files, zip files. Server message, I can say backup all clients. I can say backup that particular client. I can see the status of jobs or the host. These two, I actually use at the school district because with so many clients, there are times where I don't want to, I need to, well, for example, right now we are in the process of migrating all the teachers off their 5-year-old equipment to modern equipment. And before we do that, we want a good backup. So I use the command line to go trigger a backup on all the machines, rather than right-clicking in the GUI like crazy. A couple of scenarios. We've talked about some of these. Databases, including Outlook PST files. You can use the pre and post commands. Use the cron job to do a dump once a night, and then you just pick it up on the next backup. Full system backup, use sudo to give you the privileges to get into those files. Bare metal restores. There are ways to do that, but they are a little bit flaky. They've been posted to the BackupPC forums, and on the Unix side, it basically is you start up off an OpEx disk, you load on a BackupPC, and you start up off an OpEx, you format your hard drive, you then get SSH set up from the BackupPC server and you just dump everything back. And that I've done, that actually works pretty well. On the Windows side, you have to have a copy of the state, you load on a fresh version of Windows, and then you restore the state file and you dump it back into the registry. But without the ACLs, I'm just not 100% sure about how well that'll work with all the data files. You can also run multiple instances on one server. There's about 20 places in the code that you have to change from this directory to that directory. And if you install it via the tarball off of BackupPC.sourceforge.net, you can tell it what directory to install in it. We'll update all that automatically. Why would you want to do this? Well, Definza.com has a backup server to its BackupPC server. So we have one server in Seattle and one in Tacoma. And I basically keep everything synced between them, so if my one in Seattle disappears, people can get to their backups and do restores from the one in Tacoma. And they're actually, the one in Tacoma is back to Seattle, the one in Seattle is back to Tacoma, and I got 2 instances running on each one. Tips. BackupPC doesn't care about the time of the data files on the system on its system, because it keeps that in a separate configuration file. So no A time on the file system mount will really speed things up. It's a command of the mount, and it works really well. Because you have to worry about inodes with all these hard links, if you have a home system, don't worry about it. Doing a big system, a couple hundred clients, worry about it. Use RiserFS for your file system, because RiserFS doesn't have a fixed number of inodes. It grows them as it needs it. Clients with a common config, create one config file and put in soft links to it. If you need to find a file, we talked about using the transfer log of a full backup to figure out where the file is. Use sudo, use xtar for OSXX, pre and post commands we talked about. This is probably one of the biggest things about BackupPC is people will put in a system and then they'll run out of disk space. And getting it onto a new one is just kind of a nightmare because of all the hard links. And again, it depends. If you're doing a home system, you won't have a problem. If you're doing a system with a lot of different machines that don't have common files, you won't have a problem. At the school district, we have a problem because, you know, the principal will send the same Word document out to all the people, and so I got one copy and I got a bunch of hard links. What we end up doing at the school district is I just put in another server, and I just start them on the newer server. And then they'll just gradually migrate over. And I just shut down the old server. I just say no more backups. You can still get to do restores, you just don't get back up to that one. The idea with the DHCP with static IPs is another trick that I notice a lot of people use. Okay, in version 3.0 it came out in January. You can now edit the config file via the web interface, which is really nice. You didn't notice in my host summary there, you didn't see the disabled host. The DHCP will show that now. Hard links on the client is not supported by rsync until version 3.0. So if you have a client computer that you know uses a lot of hard links, you have to use tar to back it up. He does multiple level incrementals. Version 2.0, you got a full and incremental, and that's it. And the incremental always goes back to the most recent full. And there is a person who is just starting to make a BackupPC client, because one of the other downsides of BackupPC are firewalls. If you're here and your client keeps hiding behind a firewall, you can't get to it, because the server initiates the connection, not the client. So this is a little script that they're trying to put together to sit on a client that will initiate the connection through the firewall, and then you can go on with the normal server type of process. Yeah.
The point here,
yeah. BackupPC dump now runs, and then BackupPC nightly. You cannot have any dumps running at the same time BackupPC nightly runs when it's cleaning out the pool, and he's decoupled that so they can run in parallel. The only place I've noticed it are on really busy machines, where I've got backups going literally around the clock. And when BackupPC nightly kicks off, all of a sudden there's like a 2-hour window there when nothing's happening while it's trying to clean out all the old backups. and now you can have them run at the same time. So I'm probably going to upgrade here pretty soon just for that. But again, if you have a home system, you'll never know it. I'd say you'd have to be up to at least 100 clients before you'll run into this problem. Yes?
For my PCI and HIPAA clients, is there any provision for encrypting the backups?
No. No. So that was the one thing with the bank that they were concerned about, that we don't do any encryption on our side. So the data is coming across SSH, so that's all nice and secure. But when it gets dumped on the disk, it's dumped right back in its raw format. Now I can encrypt the disk.
That's what I was going to ask
it
about
doesn't really do me
encrypted file
much.
system.
What?
That's what I was going to ask about, was encrypted
Well,
file system.
so what's I encrypt the file system? I'm root on the server. I'm going to see anything anyway.
But I'm thinking about it when the disk is removed or something.
Yeah. Then that would make a lot of sense. But for, if you're trying to set it up for a customer or something, there's just really no way around that. So what we recommend, like the bank, is that they encrypt it before they send it to us. The downside to that is everything looks like it's brand new. So it's going to take up a lot more bandwidth and a lot more disk space.
Because everything's going to have unique hash then.
Exactly right. So you have to weigh it. In their case, it's worth it. Or actually what it was worth it for certain files, but not for all of the data. Yes?
And did you say that it hashes only the beginning of the file to test?
Yeah, the guy did a lot of research on it. You can go up to the website and read. But it's only for the first so many bytes. And so when he's reading the file over, and he gets these so many bytes, and he did this research, it comes out to be like, he'll get like 20 duplicate hits out of every couple 100,000 files or something. So the odds of it happening are just about zero.
Even if it's changed to chapter 25 of the employee handbook?
Yeah. It's weird how it works. And I've never actually had a problem with it. And again, I'm backing up close to 1,500 machines. And the teachers, if anything, will let me know if something goes wrong.
Oh, yeah.
They're a little bit picky on that. So that's all I've got. If you guys got any more questions? Yes.
I'm really into backup stuff. I was curious, why do you do